What is going on, world? What's up, guys? It's Zero here. Today I'm bringing you guys a brand new show that I am introducing on the Twitch channel, and it is also going to be one of those shows that you'll be able to watch on the YouTube channel. Welcome everyone to For the Swarm, which is our very first show, of course, within this new series that is going up on here on Twitch and on YouTube. This is our official StarCraft podcast, and I'm incredibly excited to be sharing with you guys here today what it's all about. So a quick recap, guys, of where we stand at this point in time with our shows, with all of the shows that are getting announced on Twitch, as well as, of course, these are going to be all going up on the YouTube channel for you guys to take in. On Mondays, guys, you guys can check out the Gears Cast, which is our official Gears of War podcast. Tuesday, you'll be able to watch The Resistance, which is our Watch Dogs podcast. And then on Wednesday is our Zero Dark, which is our Call of Duty podcast. Thursday is The Last Cast, which is the Last of Us podcast. And then on Friday, guys, which of course is today, is For the Swarm, which is our official StarCraft podcast. And then on Saturdays, guys, you'll be able to watch The 8 Below show, which a lot of you are already accustomed to. That was pretty much our gaming and entertainment show that went from a weekly show to a daily show and is now being turned into a weekly show once again. So the slot for that is Saturday. And then, guys, on Sunday is our Q&A show. And so with that, guys, that is the programming schedule. A ton of content that is going up on Twitch as well as on the YouTube channel, and I'm really excited to be sharing with you guys more and more about these different shows as they come out. We'll be having guest stars and such on the shows throughout the course of time, and so I'm really excited about it. And with that, guys, this is For the Swarm. So what is this show going to be about, guys? Let's get into that right here, right now. So the way that the show works, guys, is we are going to have a number of topics on a weekly basis based around the StarCraft community and just StarCraft at large. We'll be giving you guys some insight into what it all means, that being around, the game of StarCraft 2, that being also the esports side of things, and even the future of what we could be looking at down the road in the StarCraft scene. So with that, guys, let's talk about everything that we've got going on in this show here today. So let's get into that. So once again, guys, I want to say welcome everyone to For the Swarm. This show, guys, here today in this episode 1, we are going to be talking about a number of topics. And so what we go ahead and do is we'll talk about those specific topics, and I'll give you guys my opinions and thoughts on them. And then for those of you watching in the live chat, you guys can go ahead and ask your questions if you have any, and then I'll answer some of those at the end of the show in regard to today's topics. And so with that, what we're going to talk about here today on the show is the current state of StarCraft. I want to talk about the current state of StarCraft, where we stand at this point in time. I also want to talk about some esports stuff in regard to StarCraft esports, kind of where we are at least as of right now, and what I think the future of the esports side could potentially look like. And then, of course, guys, if you guys are accustomed to my YouTube channel, you guys can check out all of my StarCraft content there, which, of course, we have talked at nauseum about StarCraft 3. And so I want to talk some more about StarCraft 3 in this very first episode of For the Swarm. And then to round out the show, I want to talk about the 10-year anniversary of StarCraft 2 and what that can mean for, say, the next 10 years of StarCraft. So with that, guys, those are the show notes and what we're going to be talking about here on this show. So let's get right into it. So with that, guys, I want to talk about the current state of StarCraft. So where we are at this point in time as a community at large and what it kind of means for us moving forward here. So I believe, guys, that the current state of StarCraft as a whole is at its highest moment pretty much in its history, in my personal opinion. And the reason is because when I talk about these things, guys, a lot of it, sure, we can talk about StarCraft 1, but I'm mostly talking about StarCraft 2 here and the current state of where we are with StarCraft 2, since it's, of course, the newest game or, the latest entry in the franchise. So when I look at the totality of StarCraft at this point in time in StarCraft 2, I think that we're at the highest point and at the peak of, this community and such in a major way because of, going free to play was a huge thing for StarCraft 2, but also I also look at, from an esports perspective, the viewership that's coming in from StarCraft, the number of content creators, the number of streamers that are also coming to the scene, new and old coming into the scene that are continuing to bring content to StarCraft 2, I think is a huge deal. So I think as a community, we're at a great place. I think Blizzard's done a really good job of kind of continuing to bring out content for StarCraft 2, whether you're talking about just new map pools, whether you're talking about, of course, the co-op commanders and things of that nature to try to kind of continue the legacy and lore that is StarCraft 2. But I think just as a whole, when we look at the totality of where we stand right here, right now, I gotta say, guys, we're at our peak. I guess you could technically say that we have more peaks to accomplish and to achieve at this point, because I feel that in the entire totality, and as I alluded to, of course, we're celebrating 10 years of StarCraft 2. In this 10-year stretch, there's certainly been peaks and valleys, guys, especially when the game first came out. There were great things, and then as the game kind of evolved, it started having some valleys, and then we're kind of back up on those peaks. And I think a lot of that has to do with the free-to-play, has to do with just time. Like at the end of the day, it really comes down to just time that the StarCraft 2, as it's, throughout its history, has just had time to kind of regain a lot of the things that might have set it back in years past. And so I am incredibly excited about the future of StarCraft. I think that I'm so bullish on long term for StarCraft and in this franchise as a whole, whether that's StarCraft 2 or some other way moving forward in the future. I just think that we're at a great point in time for the community, and I think it's going to be I'm incredibly excited to see what ends up happening in the next upcoming years here, guys, as Blizzard hopefully continues to do a really good job creating further map pools and continuing to balance and have changes when things are needed, which I do think there's always going to be a need for balancing and things of that nature. But as long as they are supporting it, guys, there's going to be the creators, there's going to be the content creators, the streamers, there's going to be the pro players that are there that are consistently playing the game, and I think that's a beautiful thing. And with DreamHack, guys, taking over the esports side of things, or I should say the ESL taking over from the esports perspective, where we no longer, have Blizzard kind of running everything, and the WCS, I think that they've done an incredible job. And I think that is something that is also to really, we've got to tip our caps to, ESL and DreamHack and such for doing an incredible job of really kind of giving our game, that being StarCraft 2, like more of an audience. And I think it's continuing, guys. We're moving in a great direction. I'm excited to see where we end up going from here. But that's going to lead me into my next topic. But I want to, before I move on, I want to ask all of you, what do you guys think about the current state of StarCraft? Where do you think we stand at this point? Are you very optimistic about the future? Are you concerned at this point in time? Let me know in the comment section down below, and let's have a real conversation about it. I think it's important that we go ahead and moving into the second topic here, as I kind of alluded to, where, I think a place to pick up is with esports. And so, talking about ESL and DreamHack and kind of the current state of what is happening at this point with ESL and DreamHack, I think they're doing very good things for StarCraft at this point. I mean, Blizzard can kind of focus on the things that are needed on their side, of the spectrum. And then, of course, ESL and DreamHack can kind of focus on their end, which is the esports side. Blizzard can continue doing the balancing changes that are needed. They can continue bringing out new map pools, and I think that's really important as well. But at the end of the day, as far as the esports side of things goes, a lot of people don't like that the pro circuit as a whole is dominated by Zerg players pretty much at this point in time. And I gotta say that it really is, to me, I would love there to be more competition against the Zerg players. I just feel that these Zerg players are just on another level. It's not always balancing and such that are the issues. It's just simply that they are just better than the Terran players or than the Protoss players. And, the argument that Terran needs like significant changes. Maybe it does. I mean, I want to see further competition. I would love to see Blizzard be able to kind of balance things even more so, kind of really keep everything really tight and close together as far as the skill gap is concerned. But some of these guys are just on another level, guys. I mean, that's just really what it comes down to. I know people are getting sick and tired of seeing Raynor and Serral pretty much at every single final. Both Zerg players, and they're both absolutely incredible at their craft. Now, look, I would love to see more competition come into the fray that can really compete here. I'll give you guys, a trip down memory lane here. When I first started watching StarCraft 2, it was really in the early days. It was actually one of those esports that was one of the first that I really watched outside of Call of Duty. And it was when the MLG had StarCraft 2 as well as Halo tournaments, and I would watch them with my brother. And I remember the players back then that I loved watching. I remember watching Idra from EG and In Control. I remember watching Select from Dignitas. I remember watching Kiwikaki. I remember watching a lot of these guys coming up. And what I loved about that time in StarCraft's history is the simple fact that there was, there was a lot of diversification of different players playing different races and such. It wasn't all, it wasn't so heavy on Zerg always winning, because a lot of times it wasn't. It was actually the Terran players were winning a lot of those tournaments. There were some Zergs that were winning, as well as Protoss. It was kind of, all the way around, it felt relatively balanced. But as we got through the expansions, because that was Wings of Liberty, then when we got to Heart of the Swarm, you had Life, who was in my opinion, one of the greatest StarCraft 2 players of all time. He ended up dominating in Heart of the Swarm. And sure, there were other guys, of course, guys that were really, juggernauts within StarCraft 2 at that point. But I think as things have changed, as we've gotten, further and further into the meta, and of course after Legacy of the Void, things started changing after that, where it was, it was almost top heavy on Zerg players being the focal point, the front runners for basically, kind of taking every single tournament. Now, of course, guys, there's sometimes, a lot of people argue that Maru is still one of, the best in the world and such. And, I got to agree on, to an extent, but I look at guys like, we look at the not the WCS, but we look at like BlizzCon, which of course was the biggest event of the year for StarCraft 2 players. And we look at Dark, a Zerg player. We look at Serral, another, a Zerg player. Raynor's incredible. There's a Zerg player as well. You look at all these guys, and sure, there are definitely players that can compete against them. But I just think that, all in all, in my opinion, the reason why there's so many Zerg, players that are winning tournaments is because I just think there's a lot of players out there that are pro players just decide to play as Zerg over the other races for one reason or another. I look at guys like Special and Maru, and, I don't think there's anything that these guys are doing necessarily wrong. I mean, I think that they are still very, talented players. I mean, when you're playing at the highest level of any particular game out there, I mean, there is going to be the people at the very top, and the skill gap may be very close, but it all comes down to just the minor things, the little things throughout the course of a match that you just can't make those mistakes. And we've always seen Serral be one of those guys who doesn't make a lot of little mistakes. He's the one that's making the opponent make those little mistakes, and that's how he obtains a lot of his victories. He just bleeds his opponent dry at the end of the day and kind of just takes all those resources and just waits for them to no longer have any resources, and it just is an overwhelming force at the end of the day. But I gotta say that when I look at it, the esports scene is something that's incredible for StarCraft because it's so unique, and it's something that is really exciting too. It's a lot of fun to watch these guys play at the highest level. Do I wish there was more competition between like the races, like that being like, what I'd like to see some guys who are incredible with the Terran, absolutely incredible with the Protoss, that like are kind of like Serral, but in those other races? Absolutely. I would love to see that. Like the more competition, guys, the better in my opinion, because it really creates so many like so many great narratives around the scene. And so I would love to see that. Are we going to get that? It's hard to say. I've stated this as well, guys, that StarCraft 2 is the tennis of esports. If I think of all of the traditional sports out there, and you think of all of them, and really which one is the most difficult, which one takes the most out of you, I have to say that tennis, guys, actually is one of those sports when you watch it, it's all on you because it's a 1v1. And I mean, the amount of, you have to be incredible as far as your conditioning has to be on point. You have to have a level of speed and as well as agility and, just precise aim and such. And so I look at StarCraft as like that, where it's 1v1 and you cannot really afford to make any mistakes throughout the course of the journey of a match. And that's what makes StarCraft so special to me. Now, what I will also say about that, though, and this is going to lead us into our next topic, is what, with StarCraft and, moving forward now, do I think it's going to continue being a 1v1 esport, or could this potentially change in the future? And that's a conversation, guys, I definitely want to have with all of you. But before we move on, I wanted to ask all of you, what do you guys think about the current, state of the esports scene when it comes to StarCraft 2? What do you guys think? Are you guys kind of do you guys feel that we're in a really good place at this point in time with StarCraft 2 as far as from an esports perspective? Do you think there's things that certainly could change? And what do you guys think needs to change for there to be more competition amongst all three races? Let me know in the comment section down below, and let's have a real conversation about it. And our third topic here in the show, guys, I want to talk about StarCraft 3. We've talked a little bit about the current state of StarCraft. We've talked about the esports side of StarCraft. But now I want to talk about the future of StarCraft and where could we potentially be going here moving forward. You guys know that I love talking about the future of games, and you guys can see that all on my YouTube channel. Tons of different titles that me personally, it's pretty much, my personal opinions, but, games that I have grown up with, games that I absolutely love, and games that I would love to see continued at some point in the future. You guys can check out all that content on the YouTube channel, but I've made a lot of it. And one of the games that I've talked about a lot is StarCraft 3. I have been an advocate to try to get StarCraft 3 made, a StarCraft 3 a continuation. And a lot of this goes down to not only continuing the legacy and the lore that is StarCraft, but I think it's also, continuing from an esports perspective to, a story perspective to just a player-based perspective to pretty much everything out there, guys. I mean, every 10 years, like as we've kind of looked at StarCraft in its history, we had 10 years between StarCraft 1 and StarCraft 2. We're at the 10-year anniversary right now of StarCraft 2 at this point. StarCraft 3 has not been announced as of yet, but there's been rumblings and talk that a StarCraft 3 is going to be coming at some point in the foreseeable future. And this kind of leads me to a couple of things here, guys. Number one is that StarCraft 3, I've stated many times that this would obviously continue the legacy and the lore that is StarCraft. From a esports perspective, StarCraft 2 was kind of one of the pioneers in esports, and I think that StarCraft 3 could continue that moving forward. StarCraft 2 was at a point when it came out, it was one of those games that had such a positive reflection on esports as being one of those like founding father games that came out in esports. And I think that it would just do so much justice to have StarCraft 3 come out at some point and kind of continue that, because it would put a spotlight once again on StarCraft, number one, but number two is also the real-time strategy genre. Now, another thing we've talked about is what kind of form would StarCraft 3 make? I've stated that it needs to be a real-time strategy. However, we have seen that there were two first-person shooter StarCraft games that have been canceled. One was called StarCraft Ghost, and then more recently, it was an Untitled StarCraft first-person shooter that was also canceled. So, two first-person shooters based in the StarCraft universe were canceled, guys, over at Blizzard. Now, You can look at that from a negative perspective and think, well, we'll never get a first-person shooter StarCraft game, or you can look at it from the perspective that at least Blizzard is still looking at making something based around StarCraft. Whether we're talking a real-time strategy, or if we're thinking, you know, a first-person shooter, a mobile game, whatever it is, they definitely have StarCraft on the back of their minds. And it's been a while, and so what if we got StarCraft 3 as a real-time strategy, which I think is what it needs to be, but we also got a first-person shooter. We also got a mobile game. What this does, guys, is it builds the legacy and lore that is StarCraft and gives us another, pretty much guarantees us, even though it's not 100% guaranteed, but pretty much confirms that we're going to get another 10 years of StarCraft. From an esports perspective to just, you know, being able to have consistent, you know, DLC that comes out every couple of years and, you know, things of that nature. I have stated one of the biggest gripes I've had about the StarCraft community is that a lot of people in the StarCraft community are almost kind of concerned. There's a real fear that they don't want to go into the unknown, into a StarCraft 3, because I think a lot of people are concerned that it's not going to be as good as StarCraft 2. And my answer to that is, even if StarCraft 3 isn't as good as StarCraft 2, you can always go back to the other games if it's not as good. And well, knowing Blizzard, sure, things have changed over at the company. There's no debate about it. But when I look at it, they still got it when it comes to graphics. Imagine a StarCraft 3 with even more updated graphics. I mean, we saw the change from StarCraft 1 to StarCraft 2. Imagine what it would be StarCraft 2 to StarCraft 3. With the updated graphics and such, it could be an absolutely gorgeous game. Also, StarCraft 3 could lead us into an era where it no longer is just a 1v1 when it comes to the esports side of things. And we've seen like team leagues and such in StarCraft 2, but I think in StarCraft 3, what if they made it more of a team-based esport where they also had 1v1s, but they also had the team-based? Because we know, guys, when we're talking team versus team, those are the esports that are the biggest in the world right now. League of Legends, and you know, you can look at like even games like Call of Duty, and I mean, the list goes on and on, guys, right? What I'm getting at is StarCraft 3 would also be an opportunity to have like a fresh start for StarCraft. Another thing that people don't like talking about in the StarCraft community, which I have not shied away from, is talking about the issues that we had early on, relatively early on, in StarCraft 2. One being the match-fixing scandal that ended up happening. Of course, you know, Life was one of those pro players that was caught in the midst of all of that. And people don't like talking about that, but that is a part of StarCraft 2 history. And a lot of advertisers, a lot of teams, that being esports teams, pulled out of StarCraft 2 because of the match-fixing scandal. StarCraft 3 would be a fresh start. It would be, you know, kind of like a rebirth of StarCraft, showing that StarCraft is still on top when it comes to the esports world. It's still got it. It's still, you know, going to continue innovating and transcending the space, that being the real-time strategy genre. It could bring back the RTS genre in a major way. When we look at other RTSs out there, there's not that many, and none of them have the prestige that is StarCraft. So, look, StarCraft 3 could continue so much for this brand, for this franchise that we have all grown to love and admire over the years. Will Blizzard do it? I do believe they will. I do. Even though there's fear amongst the community and such, guys, I think that we're building a really nice movement. Just you know, within what I've been talking about on YouTube, there are other people who absolutely want to see a continuation of StarCraft 3. Now, sure, there's other people who don't, but I think that there's starting to become a much wider, you know, audience and talk of a StarCraft 3 coming out at some point or another in the future. So what do you guys think? Do you think we should get a StarCraft 3 in the foreseeable future? Do you think that, you know, we should just stay complacent with StarCraft 2 for another, say, 5 to 10 years? Or do you think that we should take that leap of faith? Or do you think, you know, Blizzard should take that leap of faith, make another game, continue trying to transcend the space, continue the legacy, the lore, the story. And the story, guys, there's so many, I mean, I feel like StarCraft is like Star Wars. There's so many different planets, so many different places to explore and start understanding. There's so much that you can explore. Even if you didn't want to follow, you know, Raynor, you know, and Kerrigan and such, even if you wanted to like kind of go into a completely new, you know, galaxy or something, whatever it is, you could definitely continue the story. You could add a new race, like a hybrid race, which is what we talked about in the past. Having a hybrid race would be really interesting, adding like new races to StarCraft 3. Things like that are what continue, you know, the legacies. And it, you know, in my opinion, I just think that we need to get over being, you know, complacent about, you know, StarCraft 2, or just, you know, having a continuation of this franchise. You know, you got to stare into the unknown, and sometimes you have to go down that unknown and, you know, see what happens. And sometimes, like, knowing StarCraft and Blizzard, I feel that Blizzard, this is a labor of love for them. They absolutely want to continue this franchise moving forward. In my opinion, why can't they continue it from a real-time strategy perspective, as well as a first-person shooter perspective, as well as maybe a mobile game as well? I just think, guys, that this is a game that needs to happen. It's not one that, you know, just like it's not necessary or something. I think that it is necessary. I think that there's, with a shaky history, there would be a ton of excitement around a StarCraft 3. It would bring a lot of other advertisers, as well as, you know, pro teams out there coming into StarCraft. From a team perspective, that could be huge. From even a 1v1 perspective, it just continues it moving forward. I see a lot more positives than negatives, but let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Let's have a real conversation about it. I want to talk about the 10-year anniversary that is now StarCraft. Happy birthday, StarCraft. I'll never forget going to the store. I went to Walmart, my local Walmart, and I picked up a copy of Wings of Liberty. Now, I had, at this point in time, did not own any PC games. I might have actually owned a couple, like, on my actual computer, but I never went out and bought a PC game. I always was a console kind of gamer. And so I was looking, when I was going to college, my first year of college, I was looking for a game to play. And when StarCraft 2 was announced and all of that, I thought about buying Diablo. I thought of getting into World of Warcraft. I thought of getting into a number of these other titles. StarCraft really drew my attention, though, because of the rating that it got from watching on, you know, I believe it was IGN and from other, you know, sources. And then that was number one, but number two was it was real-time strategy, and I never really tried one in a major way. And so I decided to take the leap of faith with Wings of Liberty, and I did, and I never looked back after that point. It was a game that I absolutely loved from the very beginning, thought it was an incredible, incredible title that had so much potential moving forward. And then after it came out, I had played it for, you know, the story, and then, of course, the multiplayer, and then when Heart of the Swarm came out, I bought that, and then, of course, Legacy of the Void as well. And it has been an incredible 10 years, should say, you know, like 9.5 years for me, of StarCraft, and, you know, StarCraft 2 in particular. I absolutely love this title. It has been, it's been incredible. It kept me out of a ton of trouble, guys, in college, because I would just play with my friends online instead of going to a bunch of parties and stuff. It was just, look, at the end of the day, it was such a great experience for me as an individual. I just thought it was a lot of fun. There was a learning curve to it, which I had to, like, I bought the strategy guide so I could kind of like learn more and more about this title and about, you know, what it was all about. Played the story. Didn't really like the story that much. It was kind of a cheesy story, but I liked kind of, you know, some of the concepts. But all in all, the multiplayer is what you're there for, even some of the co-op and things of that nature. And just playing game after game was just, it was a beautiful thing, guys. I have absolutely loved StarCraft 2 from its beginnings to now. And I'm excited about the next 10 years. Could that be StarCraft 3? Well, I'm hoping that I hope we get a StarCraft 3, guys, to continue what I loved so much with StarCraft 2. I'm hoping that we get that same kind of, that feeling like there's more to this world. There's more to this legacy of StarCraft. And so 10 years, guys, that's a long time, man. I mean, it's a long time if you think about it, that this game's been around and has just been absolutely incredible. A game that, from an esports perspective, to just, people just playing the game on a consistent basis, it is something special that I think has brought so many people together and has just absolutely been one of the staples in gaming and esports, ever since it pretty much came out. And that's saying something. That really is. There's something very special with StarCraft 2 in particular. And I'll never say, I will always say, guys, that it is the real-time strategy of our time. And I just want to see a continuation of it, man. Because a lot of the other games that I love, that being like Gears of War and Call of Duty, we're getting continuations of those games on a consistent basis. StarCraft's the one that doesn't get a lot of continuations. They update and do things of that nature, and the game still holds up very well to this day, as it did back 9.5, 10 years ago. It's a beautiful thing, how well it is kind of held up throughout the course of time. But I'm ready for the next 10 years, man, of StarCraft. I really am. I'm excited about it. There's a lot of questions here, a lot of things that I would love to see and experience again with StarCraft moving forward. Just kind of reminiscing about it, guys, about the past. It's really cool. I mean, it was such a great game. And if you guys haven't ever tried StarCraft 2, now's the best time. Free to play. Play Wings of Liberty for free and get a taste of what it's all about, man. It really has held up to this day, and there's no debate about it in my personal opinion. But I'm excited about the next 10 years. Hopefully it's a StarCraft 3 or like a StarCraft first-person shooter. Or we get continuations in one way, shape, or form to StarCraft in the future. But with that, guys, let me know, how did you get involved with StarCraft 2? At what point did you end up picking up your copy of the game and started playing it? Let me know. Are you one of the people that was there from the very beginning, or were you someone who's just now coming into the scene? Let me know, guys, and let's have a real conversation about it. And with that being said, everyone, I hope you guys did enjoy this episode of For the Swarm. And if you guys did, leave a thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, stay positive, and as always, I'll talk to you guys all in the next one. Peace.